I think that now is a good time to once again share with you how things are going with this level editor project, because I have made quite a bit of progress since last time, and I've reached another one of those rare moments when I have something that actually sort of works, and it may be a while before that happens again. So if you saw my last progress update, then this probably looks exactly the same as it did then. But I can tell you that just this month alone, I have spent hundreds of hours working on this. And I mean, I think that's true of pretty much every month for about the last 4 years of my life. But recently, I've had the kind of free time where I've been able to just pick one major job that needed doing and just work on it solidly for a few days until it's done. But a lot of the work I've been doing recently has been kind of behind the scenes stuff. So I'll start with something that was much simpler to do than everything else, but that has also made quite a big difference to the experience of using this horrible piece of software, which is the way that you move around and move things around. So up until now, it was only really possible to do anything with this editor if you had a controller plugged into your computer. That's what I'm using now. This is me moving around using a DualShock 4. And I mean, keyboard controls did always sort of work in some situations. I have improved that a little bit now, but the main thing that I've done recently is you can now move around freely just using the mouse. Because, good news, by the way, that mouse that I destroyed by drowning it in wine, I left it in a drawer for a few months, and now it works perfectly again. So now I can use that to fly around, and I can pan over here, whoa, and I can zoom out, and I can look over here, and I can zoom in, and I can pan backwards, and it's a lot of fun. And this level that I'm in is Cold Hard Crash, by the way, from Crash Bandicoot 2. And the other big thing you can do with the mouse now that you couldn't do before is drag stuff around in the level. Voila. It might not be that exciting to witness, but for the last few years, this menu over here has been the only way that I've been able to do that. And having this is still very helpful for moving things over large distances and for precision too. But in general, it's a bit tedious, and also you can't move anything diagonally with this method. And these numbers and the sliders are always based on like the world axes, so you need to keep track of which direction you're facing to be able to know which way you want to move things with this system. So being able to just like click on something and move it around like this in 3D space, I mean, it's a bit fucky, but it kind of works. It's a lot easier. I haven't added any way to rotate things just using the mouse yet, but you can still use this to spin things around if you want to. But yeah, for the position stuff, there's one extra thing I've done that's specifically just for the crates. Because yeah, this is a much nicer way to move objects around in the level, but as you can see with these pillars and this big group over here, most of the time in these games, when you have several crates in the same area, they're all sort of neatly aligned with each other. And if you want to do that yourself, it can be a lot of effort to get it spot on when you're moving them around like this. I mean, this is one instance where it would still be better to just copy the position of a crate, paste it onto another one, and then adjust it like so. Or that would be better if I hadn't added this snapping feature. The way this works at the moment is if you move a crate roughly alongside another one by dragging it like this, and you hold Alt, it will automatically snap into place as if there's some kind of invisible grid connecting all the crates together. I think I'll probably add an option to have it work the other way around, so it'll always snap by default and you can prevent that by pressing Alt. But either way, I am really happy with this. I mean, even something as simple as this would have taken so long with the way it used to work. I do still use these kind of PS1 style placeholder sprites for the crates to make them stand out more while you're making a level. But if I export and play this level, you can see that everything still lines up properly in-game. I cannot tell you how satisfying it is to see all of these boxes that I've placed here by dragging and dropping them into position in a few seconds, after years of having to mess around with those fucking sliders. This is amazing. And yes, I am playing as Nina Cortex here, but no, I haven't uploaded a Nina mod anywhere yet, because I don't have a Nina mod that works at the moment, which I can demonstrate by getting killed, because that crashes the game. I have experimented a bit more recently with getting characters and skins from CTR Nitro Fueled, like Nina, into the Insane Trilogy, but I've only really done the bare minimum to confirm that it's possible. If you play as any of them, or even just add them to a level, even if you don't die at any point, the game will always crash when you exit the level. I'll fix that at some point when I have the chance, but I mean, my priority is still this level editor. Actually, on the subject of crashing after a level, one of the biggest problems I've always had with custom levels in this game is that the vast majority of them that I've made have caused the game to crash when you finish them, or if you quit before you finish them. And even if that doesn't happen, once you go into another level or try playing the same level again, the game crashes. That's a problem that's been haunting me for a very long time. You will have experienced it for yourself if you ever played my Arctic Antics remake, or the mods that I made to get the Crash 3 superpowers working in Crash 1 and 2. And with the latter of those, it's especially annoying, because it prevents you from being able to just play through the game level by level. It would have also meant that big multi-level projects that I or anyone else may have thought about trying to make wouldn't really have worked. But as far as I can tell, I have fixed that now. This is one of those things that is like completely behind the scenes. It took a good few weeks of very hard work to get that sorted, and all I really have to show for it is that I can say, look at this example of a custom level that is complicated enough that it would have crashed the game before, but now it doesn't. And you'll just have to take my word for it on that. And I mean, some things will still crash the game, but what I've observed from all the testing I've done since I made those changes is that if the level loads initially and you can play it, the game won't crash when you exit it or at any point later on. So yeah, in theory that does mean you could now actually do something like make a full remake of one of the games and play through it all properly, in theory, but let's not worry about that for now. Let's go back to Cold Hard Crash, because I wanted to give you an update on something that I talked about last time, which is collision. Because previously I showed that I had found a way to automatically add collision to models in the game without needing to use loads of invisible walls. But for most models that was still just like simple box collision. For example, if I take this thing here, which is called Cliff 63, and move it onto the main level path and rotate it a bit, if I just did that without any further modifications, then this would just be like a big thing that's in the level visually, but that you wouldn't actually collide with. You could just run straight through this without hitting it. This level actually contains a file called fake collision to be replaced, which is appropriate for this demonstration. And if I just paste one of these things onto the same position and rotation of this model and resize it, this is just an approximation, but this box is roughly where the collision would be in-game with the old system, just like a huge invisible block. You wouldn't be able to climb up this cliff or get past it, probably. You would have had to manually build up more realistic collision from several of these collision boxes if you wanted anything better than that, which is horrible to do. And if you then wanted to move this model to a different place, or rotate it or resize it, you would have to modify each of those collision boxes to match the new location, because there were only a small number of models for which the automatic collision would actually work in a realistic way before. But now, if I get rid of this and click collision on this cliff model here, you can see that I can jump onto each different part of this model, and I'm actually walking around it properly, which is really nice. I think there are some, if I go over here, there are some penguins that continually die inside the model because of where I put it. But if you wanted to do this kind of thing with lots of individual invisible walls, it would have been a colossal amount of effort. Also, yes, I am playing as Princess Coco from CTR Nitro Fueled now. Don't worry about that. The important thing is that you can now move and rotate and resize this object however you want, and the collision will stay like properly connected to the way it looks. And this isn't totally perfect. It won't work for everything, and there are still some quite significant issues with the way I'm doing this. I mean, I'm pretty certain that there's nowhere in this game or any other game that uses this engine that I've looked at where they use this particular method for adding collision to things. I'm not entirely sure this is something that's even intended to be possible with this engine. And I think I described this as the hackiest thing I've ever done, because the proper collision system works a bit differently. And I think I probably will have to switch to using that instead at some point, but that'll be more work, and I think this is good enough for now. I had estimated that with just the automatic box collision, it would probably cut level creation time in about half, and I think it would be reasonable to say that even though there are still problems with this could well give you another doubling in speed when it comes to making levels. So that's quite nice. Oh, also, I added this opacity option here for static models like this. It took me far too long to realize that you could make things like this translucent. But again, you know, like all of this stuff, like dragging and dropping objects around the level, having them be physically in the place where you put them, and having the game not break every time you finish a level, it's all the kind of stuff that you would expect to just be there with any level editor. So you probably don't find it that impressive that I'm adding stuff like that to this editor, but it makes me very happy to have all of this shit working when for a long time I wasn't quite sure it would actually be possible. And another thing I could add to that list is rotation. If you've seen me messing around with this level editor before, you might have already picked up on this difference, but all of the camera paths in this level now are orientated in a way that actually represents how they move in-game. You can see that this camera actually now follows the way that you move through the level. And it's the same with the paths that these enemies take when they move around. And getting to the point where you can load up a level in this editor and all the cameras and enemies and platforms and everything are facing the correct way may have been the single biggest job out of everything I've ever done with this project. You wouldn't think it would be that complicated, but oh, by the way, all these things that look like gems here, they're supposed to be wumpa fruit. That's just another example of things that aren't working properly yet. But look at all this scenery. I think the textures are kind of broken a lot of the time because I haven't touched the code that deals with that for several years, but the way that everything's laid out, at least, looks the same as when you play the level. It still took a bit of work to get the rotation of these static models right initially, because the whole game is wrong by 90 degrees. And the way I'm loading and converting the models into the editor rotates them again in different ways on different axes, but at least once I'd figured out how to compensate for that, the calculation to fix it stayed consistent across every object of this type. When it comes to the interactive gameplay stuff, mostly things that move around like these enemies, it's not quite as straightforward. In my last update video, I showed that the camera was flipped around by 180 degrees. And in some levels, it was off by 90 or 270 degrees, or something completely random. And there have been several times over the last few years when I've spent like a whole day or two trying to fix that problem, and then I found that I've broken something in another level where it had been correct before I started changing things. So every time that's happened, I've just given up and decided to leave it until later. But then this time around, I thought I'd better just stick at it until I was done, because I would have to do it at some point, so it might as well be now. So that was a fun 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 days. I've lost track now, but in the end, it was actually not as complicated as I thought it was. I eventually realised that most of these problems were fixed by just rotating certain objects by the same amount twice. But even then, there's still different rules for different things. Some properties use degrees and some use radians, and I can't tell you how much time I've wasted by not realising I was accidentally converting radians into radians and stuff like that. And getting everything to face the right way when you first load up a level is only part of the problem. I still had to change everything about what happens once you select something in the editor and move it around, and also what happens when you export a level and play it, to get everything back into a form where the game understands it. I think I am now at the point where every camera in every level is correct when you look at it in the editor, and pretty much everything else is too. And 99% of things stay correct once you select them. But there's still a bit more work to do with that. And I haven't even started to apply all those fixes to like saving and opening level projects and stuff like that. I definitely need a little break before I continue with that stuff, now that I have a better understanding of how all this works. And that's where all of these fun mouse movement features come from. I needed to do something that would be less of a strain on my well-being than trying to have cameras facing the correct way all the time. But yeah, I guess the gist of this little update is that I'm finally getting to some of the major problems that needed fixing. I think probably each of the big problems I still need to deal with will be a similar amount of work to the rotation fixes, and I'm still not completely done with that yet. But I could probably call this the beginning of the end. It is all starting to come together now. I mean, it's the beginning of the end of the beginning, because it's still just version 1 that I'm building up to. But after 4 years, I am getting there. Yeah, I know, I probably could have made a whole game of my own or something in that time. Believe me, there are a lot of things I would rather be doing with my free time that I keep pushing back because of this, but I do have my reasons for working so hard on this specific project, and those reasons mean I won't be slowing down anytime soon. And I think there may be a joke about crunch that I could make here, but I'm too exhausted. Good night. My priority is still this fucking piece of shit level editor.